important that the procurement policy be communicated throughout the organization, and then to ensure that the correct procurement processes are followed. So there is also the communication of the procurement policy through to the organization, but then also we need to really look at some form of training to the SCM staff and necessarily to the BUs to ensure that the procurement policy is implemented regularly or effective. My apologies. Again, there's necessarily the meetings that are taking place within the supply chain management team to ensure that they are aware of the issues and the challenges experienced on the one side, and also then ways and means to avoid any pitfalls that have been identified. And again, there's a continued engagement with BUs on the procurement process, and then also improving the management and oversight of the various procurement processes. And again, also informal on-the-job training is required, given that the procurement processes and regulations change as and when required by the National Treasury. In terms of causes of irregular expenditure, now obviously expenditure is irregular when obviously there hasn't been an effective price quotation or an RFP process followed, and necessarily our cash flow constraints to a large degree have led to a certain level of irregular expenditure, specifically when considering Note 3 or Treasury Instruction Note 3 of 21-22, that prior to inviting price quotations, confirmation is to be given of budget. That necessarily we would have no problem in doing. We do have budget, whether we have the cash flow and whether we are able to make payment within 30 days or as per contract period, that has been proven slightly problematic given the declining revenues that we've been showing, and necessarily the financial sustainability challenges that we have been facing. So what we then have said is, and what we have seen is, then necessarily where there's an existing contract in place, we've had to carry on with that contract because we are unable to confirm the cash flow and that the payment will necessarily be made within 30 days. Again, formal training is being considered, and we need to look at how we will be communicating that through the organization, through virtual platforms such as Zoom or Microsoft Teams for that matter. And then also the consolidation of the spend per commodity at a national level. So splitting occurs where obviously you split the value of the commodity so that it doesn't, that sort of falls within the radar of having to go to an RFQ. But necessarily what we are now doing is we are looking at the procurement plans, and where possible we are consolidating spend per commodity so as to ensure that we do not then fall foul of procurement regulations. And also there's a system update required to SAP, which is required to improve the control environment. And then also in terms of what is required is BUs procuring goods and services without following a competitive bidding process is being addressed. And that is necessarily where irregular expenditure occurs. That then necessarily leads to a consequence management assessment certificate that gets completed and then gets sent through to the Financial Misconduct Committee assessment and the determination of action to be taken. Now then, just some challenges in resolving the irregular expenditure. As indicated, we have irregular expenditure dating back as far as 2016. And in some instances, the employees have left the employ of the organization. We're also finding, as identified by the AG and the BRR report of last year, is that we have old and legacy systems leading to the inability to trace the responsible individual. Now, unfortunately, at this point in time, given the position that we are finding ourselves in at the post office, also with all the negative news that's surrounding us in terms of Section 189 and our financial sustainability challenges, that necessarily leads to a low staff morale, and then necessarily also to a low wanting to resolve these matters. So it's always, I wouldn't say a battle, but it's something that we need to concentrate on, and we need to make sure that these are done, and we are having to follow up for these things to be done. Again, also, there are capacity constraints with BUs. That's not just in terms of capacity, intellectual capacity. There is also capacity in terms of equipment, tools of trade. Specifically our hardware, our computer hardware is very old and needs to be replaced quite urgently. And necessarily the impact of load shedding. Now, for employees that are working on a laptop, they are able to carry on working, given that there's a battery that they can be working on. But if there is a desktop, necessarily when there's load shedding, and we do not have backup generators in our branches, and then necessarily the administrative offices, that places a slight problem as well. Again, there's the reallocation requests that we are having to deal with by BUs, and then we're having to assess these, and then, where possible, reassign or hold the responsible BU identified responsible. And then the printing and scanning of the consequence management assessment certificates, and then load shedding. So, Chair, with that is really where we are finding ourselves in terms of the irregular expenditure and resolving these matters. Thank you.
Solicitor.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, Minister, Deputy Minister, board members present and colleagues. Chairperson, before I start, let me just notify that we do have our Deputy Chair of the board present with us today, Dr. Vuma, but she did give me permission to proceed with the presentation. Next slide. So on this presentation, Chair, will touch on those three items, just a quick update on the audit status. We'll briefly talk to irregular expenditure and then the update on the material irregularities. And I will be brief as directed, Chair. Quick update, Chair, we did develop an audit action plan. We are currently implementing the plan, and the plan was informed by a workshop that we had with the Auditor General, just to ensure that whatever intervention that we are implementing will be able to have the required impact and make the required and expected changes. Currently, we are focusing first on the prior information to address some of those qualifications. So all the information that we are providing to the Auditor General is first reviewed by our own internal audit, just to ensure that it's in order and it does comply with the expectations of the Auditor General. We have submitted most of the information, and the last batch of information for the prior years is we submitted on the 22nd of March relating to our fixed assets. We did issue guidelines to the organization just to make sure that everyone knows their roles and responsibilities. We've centralized our record keeping, because one of the key challenges in the prior was limitation of scope, as it was taking us too long to provide the auditors with the required information. We've started some training. There were concerns raised by the AG that some of our officials don't have the necessary training that is expected. Training is continuing. Training is continuing. We did have another one that was done last week Friday. We also have a weekly executive management committee meeting just to review the audit process and whether we're making any impact, and where necessary, where intervention can be implemented. We've also set up a war room on the audit, and the whole purpose of the war room is to ensure that we are able to monitor the audit process quite closely, and if there are any challenges thereof, those can be quickly escalated to the EXCO for swift intervention. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. Just an update, Chair, on where we are. In the last audit, the AG raised about 171 findings. These are individual findings, and we thought this is best to do it in this fashion, because then we'll be able to ensure that each and every finding has an action to address it. So there were a total of 171 findings. As at last week, we were outstanding about 76 still to be implemented. So we're just about 60% of what was raised in the previous financial year, and the work is continuing I just don't have the exact details as said today, but some have been closed by the auditors. In the same process I referred to on the earlier slide, the auditors do check the information. They also check before we close an audit finding before they can tick it as meeting the expected requirements of the AG. So 60% and counting, and towards the end of the financial year, this month specifically, we are expecting to have addressed most, if not all, the findings that are there to ensure that we can progress from improve from a qualification to a without a qualification. If you move to the next slide, Tanya, on irregular expenditure in the 21-22 financial year, our irregular expenditure that incurred in the year reduced from 820 million rand to 282 million rand. What this thing says to us, Chair, is that the measures that have been implemented, which are detailed in the sort of the bottom half of the slide, they are really coming to fruition. And when you look at the 282 million rand, about 247 of that number is continuing irregular expenditure. And what that means is that it's things that we are already aware of, that we are already working on, and is to do with access links, and we have already prepared a condonation submission which should address the findings that, rather the irregular expenditure that is continuing. So if you are to reduce the 282 by the 247, it will really show that we are making quite a significant progress in terms of addressing the causes of irregular expenditure, and then we are definitely addressing the root causes. We also have a loss control committee, which then goes through all the instances of irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure, and follows the guidelines that are issued by National Treasury. And there's quite a detailed list of disciplinary measures that have been implemented on all the non-compliances. All the audits that are, all the bids that are above 10 million rand, they are subjected to a probity audit, which is done by our internal audit. To avoid a lot of cancellation and misalignment of specs, all the specs are now approved by a bid adjudication committee, and that committee is advised by our risk unit and our legal unit. Go to the next slide, Tanya. So, Chair, I think in the slides I've spoken to most of the items. The only other item is that we have a document management system, just to ensure that all our SCM documents are centralized and we don't have similar challenges as what we've had in the past. Next slide. Just on the material irregularities, Chair, we had 2 material irregularities, and they did not arise from the 21-22 financial year. They arose from the 2021 financial year. So in the previous audit, we did not have any new material irregularities. These are the 2 that are almost 2 years old, and status update on them. The first one was relating, which is now we're calling it Blue Turtle, but that's the name of the counter, the service provider on the other side. We had paid for licenses that we didn't end up utilizing, and we did go on an arbitration process for those licenses, or the related value of those licenses. And unfortunately, the arbitrator ruled in favor of the service provider. What we are now doing is that we are already implementing consequence management on the responsible officials. We are also considering recovery of those funds from the involved or responsible officials. On the second item is named Trade Zone. We had paid for a conference that never materialized, so we never got benefits of that fee that we paid. At least this one, we have made some progress. We have entered into a settlement with the Trade Zone. And maybe what I mean by settlement, just to give it context, is we've entered into a payment plan. So they will be paying the full amount that was paid to them. So we're not settling to a lesser amount on this one. Similarly, on this one, we've already taken consequence management on the responsible officials. The other official that was responsible is no longer in the employ of SETA. So this is the presentation, Chair, on the audit related matters. The next presentation will also be brief, is on the vacancies. Can move to the next slide, Tanya. Move. Next one. We'll summarize there's just the organogram, and the orange is just the vacancies, Chair. No, you can go to the next slide. So if you look at the slides, Chair, high level, we are looking at we focus on the vacancies at our executive level and our HOD's head of departments level, which is just the level below the EXCO members, or the executive managers rather. So we had a total of about, or maybe firstly, before I even get to the vacancies, finally the position of the managing director has been filled, and it's expected that the MD will commence office the 1st of April 2023, which is next month. So that's quite a good progress, Chair, from the board that's there. So they moved quite swiftly to ensure that they can fill that vacancy. On the other vacancies, we had about 13 vacancies at those two levels, the executive and the HOD. And of 4 of them were executives and 9 of them were head of departments. Of the 4 executive vacancies, it was for all 4 of them was as a result of resignations. So 2 of those positions have been advertised. In fact, they have closed, and the process of running the administration part of the recruitment has commenced, and the other 2 will be advertised in due course. Similarly, of the vacancies at the HOD level, they will also be advertised in due course. So generally, when you look at the number of vacancies in relation to all the positions, most of the critical positions have been filled. I mean, obviously with the exclusion of these ones that we are in the process of filling. So I think maybe the point I'm trying to make is that at the management level, we quite capacitated to quite a great extent. And where there are these vacancies, we do have officials that are currently acting in those roles. So the functions are being performed on an acting basis. I think this should conclude our presentation, Chair. Thank you.
Waiting for the next one.
Thanks, Chairperson. It's Lucas Ndala from the interim CEO of Postbank. I'm with my chairperson, Mr. Tabile Wong. Chairperson, I don't know if you wanna do a quick intro.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Honorable Minister. The name is Tabile Wong. Sorry, the name is Tabile Wong. I will hand over to our interim CEO to take us through the issues, then I'll come back during question time. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to the Chairperson of the committee, the Minister, Deputy Minister, members of the committee, and all colleagues from the department and entities. From our side, I think we were requested to provide, on the supply chain side, the reasons for the irregularities within that space. And the environment that we're coming in, I think just to provide a bit of a brief context, that the Postbank has been carved out of the post office with effect from 1 April 2019. And initially, all our supply chain requirements were processed via the post office, or SAPO. And subsequently, the Postbank took control of the procurement environment through their own team, building in their own team. But there's still a requirement to further beef up the team. So we currently are having some capacity constraints that are linked to our setup and making sure that we can build a fully fledged bank. So that process is ongoing, and as we have been impacted quite a bit by the moratorium on recruitment. In terms of the irregularities that we are seeing through our process, most of them relate from failure to follow due process, and I think the biggest one being poor planning, and I think a lot of this related to where we failed to commence some of the procurement process on time, and a lot of our contracts we had to seed them from SAPO, and also some of the contract expiry periods were not necessarily properly managed, as we didn't have a proper contract management system. We are now in the virtue of looking into that as part of the bigger IT modernization process, as now it will enable us to be able to onboard the various systems that can enable us to work better. Then the other area was where we have deviations where without following due process. This was the other contributor towards that, and a lot of them related to contracts that are old, because the nature of our business is such that some of the critical systems that we are sitting on, you cannot necessarily cancel them immediately. So that process of contract renewal becomes very, very critical. In terms of how we've done the contract management, I think some of the things that we are now introducing is monitoring the contract spend to ensure that it aligns with the output and as per the contract administration. But also what we need to do is that follow the approvals for deviations or extensions timeously. And then I think this talks to monitoring the term of the contracts, and I think now the processes are quite advanced to start making sure that we will have a much more thorough process. And it's been one of the pain points that the board has been raising with us. In terms of contract closeout, it's another area that we just need to make sure that our contract closeouts are in a way that avoids any wasteful and fruitless expenditure. So to that extent, I think some of the mitigations that we've put in place whilst we're waiting to have automated systems is to basically currently working on around manually verifying the contract spend in the contract as per the contract management system. It's not yet in place. And this one is basically helping us to try and mitigate some of the challenges that we currently have. And then the second one is around putting in place the contract management framework together with the training. And there's some work that is being currently undertaken to ensure that we can get this in place, including the contract management tool or project management tool that is currently being implemented. And with that as well, the other area that we have not highlighted here that we are undertaking, there's an investigation that's currently taking place. It's a wider forensic investigation that's looking at the various contracts, including some of the issues of fraud that has been historically raised. And based on that report, we will implement adequate remedial actions. And in some instances, some of the people that were with the bank have left the bank. So it will depend on the nature of the recommendations that we get from the investigation, and we will implement it accordingly. Then when we come to the vacancies, I think one of the key things with the post office, with the post bank, is that in the last year and a bit, we were not able to do any recruitments due to the ministerial moratorium. So we are sitting with a situation where a lot of our top level, exco level, is acting people. So the board has now commenced with the process of filling these vacancies. And after the moratorium was removed in late November. And where we are sitting now is that the CEO, the CEO role, I think the process, they've done the interviews. So they are awaiting the fit and proper assessment, for the board to make a final appointment. And also the CFO role, the interviews have now taken place. And I think there's additional interviews coming in, as well as the CIO interviews. Those have been done. The chief audit executive, I think the shortlisting has been done, and with the interviews happening in the next coming week. And also the company secretary, I think the shortlisting is in the process of being done. And then now also the interviews will commence in due course. So I think this will help to fill up the key roles that have been vacant, but also because we require the fit and proper assessment by the Reserve Bank. So they will have to go through that, and then the appointments will be made. And then thereafter, we will look at capacitating the organization, going to the layers below the key executive layers. So there we've got just over 100 vacant posts from resignations, and also with the posts that, in the structure that were not filled in due to the moratorium that came in prior to the board or the company fully populating or employing all the key roles within its structure. So I think in terms of all these assessments, I think the one key thing is that, in terms of the fit and proper assessment, there we've got the Auditor General as well as the EY that we have been engaged to undertake this process. And I think the next element will be once all this have been filled in, is to then undertake the final process with the Reserve Bank, which will ensure that the bank now has a fully capacitated leadership team, which will enable us to then activate the process of finalizing the banking applications once also the amendment bill has been resolved. And last, the only element that will be remaining will be the variation notice that we are currently addressing with the Reserve Bank. I will pause here and then maybe allow the chairperson, if he's got any final remarks. Chairperson, you can come in.
Thanks, Ndala. Nothing to add from my end.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson.
Any outstanding presenter, DJ?
Thank you, Minister. The next set of presentations, we will deal with Sentech, Nemisa, BVI, and Zadna.
Is that me or can't hear?
No, Honorable Chair, Sentech, they are on the platform.
But I can't hear.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, DG. Good morning, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee. Good morning, Minister. Yes, we are on the platform, Chair. I'm with the Chairperson of the Sentech Board, Setsane Modau. So she has given me permission to proceed with the presentation. And greetings to the Portfolio Committee members. Chair, with your permission, I have flashed my video initially just to confirm to the committee that they are speaking to the right person. So I will request that I remove the video just to preserve the bandwidth in case there are glitches during the presentation, if you can allow, Chairperson.
Please proceed.
Thank you. And then in terms of the presentation, Chairperson, from a Sentech point of view, we do not have a long list of irregular expenditure, Chairperson. We submitted to the department and the committee our presentation, which reflects on 3 items as flashed on the screen right now. The irregular expenditure from the Sentech submission is of recent past years. We do not have a lot of prior years irregular expenditure. Most of them have been processed from the investigation and the consequence management point of view, Chairperson, and we have instituted disciplinary process and undertaken and commenced with the recovery processes on some of these issues, Chairperson. As you can see, our irregular expenditures are linked to criminal activities. So we've also had to institute criminal charges in terms of these items, Chairperson. Remedying this and remedying.
Person, can I please ask that the slide be moved?
I'm sure Mr. Lishope, you hear that the slides are not moving. So if you can refer which slide you're talking to, and then go to that.
Okay. Yes, I had shared. I know there is sometimes. Maybe let me stop sharing and start sharing again, Chair. Then if you could maybe just highlight if the presentation is. Can you see my presentation, Chair? Maybe we should start there.
We can see it now.
Okay. Yeah, I may have to stop and share. So this is the slide that I am presenting on the irregular expenditure. And apologies about that glitch of the slides not moving. So I will just, maybe quickly go back. We have 3 items. All 3 of them come from the recent financial year. We do not have a lot of irregular expenditures coming from prior years, Chairperson. And our feedback to the committee is that these 3 items have been processed from the consequence management and the disciplinary process, Chairperson. As highlighted on our presentations, the nature of fraudulent activity. So we've also had to institute criminal charges against the affected processes and employees, Chairperson. So from remedying these issues going forward, Chair, we are enhancing the internal process from the segregation of duty and oversight point of view. In this particular instances, we will ensure that the banking details are confirmed by supply chain before payments are made by finance, just to make sure that there is property and confirmation by somebody independent from finance to avert the recurrence of these issues, Chairperson. So in the main, this is the irregular list and dashboard from Sentech, and we are presenting this to the committee. The next slide, few slides are on the HR vacancies, Chairperson, so I will be moving to that. But here I have to stop sharing again and just go back there. In terms of the HR vacancies, Chairperson, our vacancy rate, Chair, sits at about 20%, Chairperson. And what we also subjected to in terms of limitation of filling vacancies is the moratorium on hiring, which was instituted around July 2019. We are having to approach the minister every time we fill critical vacancies. We've done that on 2 occasions successfully, Chairperson. So in terms of the 2 positions that were recently approved were those that are legal appointments, occupational health and safety positions. And then we also had the legal electrical engineers appointment approved by the minister as well, Chairperson. In terms of the progress on overall, the recently filled vacancy from HR is that of the CFO. We have appointed a CFO on an interim basis. She is serving Sentech on a contract of 18 months, which commenced on the 1st of February, Chairperson. And then we using different approaches during the moratorium to ensure that there is resource and capacity continuity here. And these initiatives include secondment and acting appointments on critical vacancies, Chairperson. And the moratorium on filling of vacancies have been engaged with the department and the minister. Our request is that it be lifted at the end of this financial year when we conclude some of the proceeding process related to the measure of Sentech and BBI chairperson. Our last slide deals with the human capacity appointment irregularities and the processes that we have put in place to vet that. As the organization, we have a functional policy in terms of recruitment and selection, which sets the guideline for internal and external appointments, chairperson. So all appointments are subjected to that policy process and policy objectives, chairperson. It seeks to achieve fairness and equitable employment in all places. The company also has the managed integrity assessment. We want to make sure that our selected and appointed candidates meet the requirements of authentic employees, and their qualifications are also authentic. So we do run that process. We also ensure that there are no criminal records with those employees that we are onboarding, chairperson. We have also established a panel, which is a panel of independent interviewers from different sections of the company to just make sure that the possibility of the hiring line function by us, it's also managed or enhanced through independent participant, the chairperson. In the main, those are key issues. The irregular expenditure list is managed. Chair, we do have vacancies as the organization. We manage those through request from time to time to the department and the minister. And going forward, our submission is that the moratorium on hiring be lifted so we can fill the remaining vacancies. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, committee.
Please,
Chair, for the sake of time, I'm going to ask Zadna to present. Next is Nemisa, and they will be very succinct just to touch on the salient issues. Thank you.
Thank you, DG, and greetings to the chair, greetings to the minister, as well as to the honorable members of the committee and colleagues. I will just be very brief, chairperson, but before I need to apologize on my chairperson who has given us the permission to proceed with this presentation. She had to attend to some emergency and she could not join us, Chair. So I'll just proceed. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this one is around progress on filling vacant positions at Nemisa. So currently, Nemisa has reviewed its organizational strategy, and out of that, there was a realization that there was a need to review the organizational structure, which was inadequate. The focus was mainly on filling the vacancy of Chief Financial Officer. And with this one, interviews have been conducted and a recommendation has been submitted to the Office of the Minister for review and approval. And the other targeted positions in line with the proposed revised organization structure are that of the Executive Manager Corporate Services, Executive Skills Development, as well as Chief Digital Officer. This will only be filled once the revised organization structure has been approved by the Minister. Next slide, please. In terms of action plans to address irregularities, Chairperson, Nemisa does not have material irregularities identified thus far, nor even those whether the AGSA has identified those. However, in the previous meeting, we did report that we have been dealing with irregular expenditures, and we did report that 98% of those have been dealt with and consequence management has been implemented, and 2% of those are under investigation. And those that have been processed have been submitted to National Treasury for condonation. And in terms of action plans to prevent and address irregular expenditure or irregularities, we have fraud awareness sessions. We also have developed a fraud and prevention awareness plan. We communicate regularly with employees on these issues and have established a fraud hotline and have developed also a fraud risk register, which we review every month and on a quarterly basis submitted to our audit committee. This has helped us quite a lot, and also an effective consequence management system. If we can move, yeah, I think this is all. We were just wanting to make sure that we are short. Thank you.
Thank you, BVI.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Mr. Good morning, honorable members. If you give me the access so I can share my screen, then I'll proceed. All right. I'll just briefly share the video as well, so that you can relate to who is speaking. Thereafter, let me go on mute. Just hold a second. I would like to present my own presentation. I don't have access to share. All right, I'll proceed then on what we have. Very quickly, I'll talk about the background. We are also operating, Chairperson, under the moratorium, especially because of the impending merger between BBI and Sentech, so that we avoid resource duplications and so on. That has affected, obviously, the operations at this stage. But we believe that once the moratorium is lifted and once the merger has been completed, then it will make it easier to implement or to fill in the vacancies and implement the turnaround strategy that we've been working on. Part of what we are doing is to use temporary employment for some of the positions, as well as using some trainees and interns in part of the positions that are vacant. We know from working with our teams and colleagues that the employees are quite overstretched at this moment. There's a lot of work that is being done, and seeing that we've been losing quite a lot of people, it's becoming more and more difficult. So we have put together a plan whereby we get different people from different environments, being flexible areas, so that we are in a position to be able to do the critical work. We will, however, move ahead once the acquisition has taken place to fill in the
Yes, it's on my side.
We look at the existing positions at the moment for the CEO
Not sure it's on my side, honorable members. I can't hear.
We lost him, Chairperson.
Acting and CFO of the executive positions. Yeah, list four
Yeah,
of the
we are
people,
losing you.
compliance, risk, and audit. We've got a, let's move to the next slide. I can still hear you. Can you hear me now? Can you proceed to the next slide? All right. On the next slide, then it shows the table of the various positions, and the one before, slide number 4. Yes, thank you. So on this slide, it's to show at an executive level which of the people we have under the various executives as well, and including senior management, middle management, and supervisor, and so on. So out of the 46 open positions, and currently there are now 49, we have had 3 more resignations due to workload. Out of the 49 positions, 24 are filled through the insourcing or the secondments, the job rotation that I spoke about earlier on. If you go to the next one. In terms of irregular expenditure, we do not have high numbers of irregularities. The numbers that, the historical numbers of irregular expenditure that we have would have been coming from our SCOM contracts, where we had to continue using the services of the SCOM fiber without a contract in place. They did not sign on their side, and we could not afford to switch off the clients, so we had to continue using those services. Those are the big number irregularities that come through. But for the smaller numbers that are coming through, we have policies in place to address that, various policies including fraud prevention, whistleblowing, risk management, conflict of interest, and we apply these policies rigorously in our environment. And then the governance structures in place to control and manage the irregular expenditure. We've got the loss control committee in place, as well as internal audit, which conducts quarterly and supply chain audits. Next slide, please. Okay, so continuing with the addressing of irregularities, some of the interventions that we are running is conducting workshops on supply chain policies, the National Treasury workshops done annually, and then the effective. We also have regular reporting and monitoring of unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, as well as investigations that take place from the loss control committee that is managed by the CFO. We have got a monthly reporting on the list of contracts, the due dates, and what else needs to be advertised well in advance, so that we don't fall into the trap of utilizing a contract that has expired. In general, that is it from BBI, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Dr. Zadna.
As we move to Zadna, I'm reminding you again now of time. That with the remaining ones, if you can try and push to 11, let's assess that. And I also ask honorable members to just check on the platform of the committee as we do the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, Chairpersons, and fellow colleagues. Thank you so much. I'm joined by our Chairperson, Ms. Palisa Ligodze, and our Treasurer, Mr. Nicholas Msibi. Our CEO is away on a business trip. Due to the time difference, he will not be able to join. My name is Peter Madabu. I do assist on his absence. If we can just move to the next slide, please. Due to time issues, I will only touch on based on the progress on the filling of vacancies and the second point. If you can move, please. Chairperson, from our side, we only have 2 vacancies, that of the namespace development manager, which to date we have advertised it, and we are in the process of trying to find out what will be the best person to find. The reason being that on our previous interactions, we couldn't find a proper person to be able to do the job that is expected of that. And then the second position there was of the human capital officer, which was just vacant recently because of the resignation of the candidate that was holding that positions. We, however, advertised the position and we are preparing the interviews. The interviews will be starting of today in the afternoon, actually. We do not have any issues of irregularities during our financial year and last financial year, and we are happy that we'll do our whatever that's possible for us to keep it like that. I think that concludes the presentation. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Good morning, Chairperson, Minister, and members of the Portfolio Committee. My name is Mashil Wolog. I'm the CEO of FPB, Film and Publication Board. With me is the Chairperson of the board, Ms. Zama Mkosi, and the executives. I think in the interest of time, we'll just do the oral one without projecting the slides, because ours is just one slide that we want to talk to around the vacancies, because we got it in audit for the period under review. Then regarding the vacancies, Chair, you recall that the Film and Publication Amendment Act came into effect on the 1st of March 2022 following the presidential proclamation. And as a result, we did a new structure, and out of the new organizational structure, there were 143 positions that were identified, moving from the 105 that we had previously to execute the new mandate. 115 positions are funded due to the limited budget that we have as the entity, because we didn't get any additional money to fill the structure. Out of this, 32 have been prioritized for recruitment, and we hope to complete this by 31st of March 2023. All the executive positions, including the one of the CEO, have been filled. So the ones that we are filling now are for the lower part of the structure. And then the rest of the structure will be populated on need basis, subject to funds availability. That, in a nutshell, is the presentation from the Film and Publication Board, Chair. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to the Honourable Minister and the DM, all the committee members represented. My name is Kwata Matikizela. I am with Usaasa, the acting chief executive of Usaasa. I am joined by the chairperson of the board, Ms. Sugisa Daphne, who is in this platform, together with the chairperson, with the board member. Chair, we're just going to be succinct in terms of the vacancies. Usaasa has not been able to go out on market due to the moratorium and the emanating dissolution that we are currently dealing with. And therefore, all the key positions are currently vacant or filled with resources from the department as secondments. In terms of material irregularities, we currently do not have. And is confirmed by AGSA. However, we do have irregular expenditures. Majority of it emanate from old and legacy issues around that started around 2014, 2015, which were never dealt with in the organization. The only irregular expenditures we currently have in this time frame are those due to contracts that on month to month, like the rent, because we cannot perform or commit to longer term commitments there. If you look at the light slide, and just in terms of the audit action plan, slide number 9, Saito, we have been able to conclude and implement 24% under Usaasa. and 13% under 46% under Usaf. We are currently busy and concluding. The aim is to conclude the action plan, Chair, before the end of the financial year. The other slides then just talk to the root causes. As I said, majority of our root causes are legacy issues and also contracts that have not been dealt with due to our emanating dissolution. I think I will conclude there, Chair, through you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Lastly, it is Icasa and will be concluded. Thank you.
Honorable Timur, if you can switch off the video camera for now, as I asked.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister. My name is Fikile Shongwane and I'm from Icasa. With me is Nicolene, Executive Human Resources. First and foremost, I'd like to tender apology for our CEO, who is on family responsibility leave, and I'm standing in for her. Just briefly, currently we have a total of 9 vacancies, 5 of which are at executive level and 4 are at management level. I will stop here and request the executive, acting executive HR to take us through on these vacancies high level. Thank you, Nicolene.
Thank you, Fikile, and good day, honorable members. So I'm just going to high level overview. So the first position we have is the Chief Information Officer. It's a newly created position that we are currently in the process of the recruitment process. Then we have the Chief Audit Executive. This position became vacant due to our previous one being appointed as our CEO, and we currently have an acting capacity there and also busy in the process of recruiting. Next slide, please. The Chief Financial Officer, we had a resignation, and from the 1st of March, we have our management accounts that's acting in this capacity, and we've also commenced with the project. We are currently finalizing the executive HR recruitment process. We will have an executive HR by the next couple of 2 months on board. Next slide, please. The Chief Operations Officer, we haven't filled this position because we haven't had budget allocated due to the moratorium on positions, but we will have now been allocated budget in the new financial year, so we will commence with the recruitment. And this is the executive position. If we can go to the next slide, it's the management positions. Just high level overview. Please, can we just move to the next slide? Thank you. So we just have the manager talent sourcing, also resignation. It is in the process of being recruited. Same with the senior manager spectrum licensing. We also are busy finalizing that process. And then the final slide. Next slide. Is this the senior manager ICT license services, where we do have acting capacities there, and we'll be appointing that in the new financial year. And also the manager radio communication in terms of getting budget in the new financial year. In terms of irregularities, my apologies, we don't have anything for this financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes the portfolio. I would like to hand back to you and the Minister. Thank you.
Minister, I'm just checking if you want to say any point before we get to members' engagements.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I must appreciate the opportunity, Honorable Chair, but I thought it is critical, just for the purpose of today, to restate the points in a minute articulated by CEO of SABC on with regard to the appointment of the board that is what is at stake, being that financial sustainability of the SABC, the ability of the institution to deliver on its mandate, and the institutions incurring massive financial losses, the continuation of the situation affecting it is an ongoing concern. Also, putting in at question the issue of revenue generation plans that cannot be up.
I think I've
lost advertisers and the clients of this. The biggest wish is that all the processes that are pertaining to the completion of the finalization of the board could be finished on time. That's all one can say. I'm saying this, Chair, because I know, I don't know at what point the committee will be dealing with this, where the president would have written correspondence to Parliament. That the biggest wish is that we wish that process could be completed as soon as possible, with the hope to minimize the consequences of the risk the institution is confronting. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, I would, without waste of time, take those members who would want to speak on the presentation. I have directed you to look at the WhatsApp group, so I take it that when there are no responses, you so agree that for purposes of quality oversight, we take engagement now, and that's why I'm giving you space. And then we'll take the GCIS, of course, because at 12 to 13 hours, we're to look at the subcommittee, and that will move the subcommittee to the 18 hours given the late approval for us to consider the referral, so that we still do it today. And immediately after the subcommittee, in the evening, we convene the committee to consider the report of the subcommittee, so that we don't just rush for the sake of time, but it's also to allow, given the importance of the item, that different stakeholders are well informed that the item is before the committee this evening. So Honorable Umbu, first, followed by Honorable Kolaband. I see Honorable Odlani. The committee support will help me identify other hands that I may not be seeing. Honorable Kubeka will be after Honorable Odlani. So those would then continue in that line. Honorable Gumbu, you are recognized. You can proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and greetings to the Minister and the Deputy Minister in the presidency, honorable members and everyone on the platform. Chair, let me appreciate the presentations made, which are very straightforward. Chair, I think the department and its entities are doing well in terms of addressing irregular expenditure and on consequence management. Measures are being put in place, and they are again on the filling in of vacancies. I think they are also doing well, and yeah, I also think that they're also doing well because for the positions that are not yet filled, there is a clear indication to fill those positions, and I think that is commendable, Chair. But Chair, on SABC, on mitigation factors to counter losses, Chair, just one thing there, if they can just elaborate further on the initiatives that are being undertaken to encourage license holders to pay for their licenses so that we can have a better understanding of as to what are those initiatives and how are they going to be implemented. I'm raising this, Chair, because I believe this is one critical area in terms of revenue collection at SABC. Chairperson, on SAPO, on the implementation of Section 189, just want to check as to what is the reaction of the organized labor on the implementation of Section 189, because I believe they're also being taken on board on this process, Chair. On Sentech, Chair, I would like to appeal to the Minister for the lifting of the moratorium so that Sentech is able to fill in vacant positions as they are also critical. Lastly, Chair, I think we must commend those entities that that do not have issues of irregular expenditure. For example, Zadna and Icasa, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Kolabanat, you are recognized. You can proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and greetings to the Minister who I have served with on the JSCI for some years. Most interesting that you're now on this committee. If I could start with the SABC and also about the TV licenses. A couple of years ago, I got a very threatening letter. I phoned up and realigned their thinking because I've had a debit order paying the license annually since I worked at the SABC for many, many years. Yet yesterday I received another threatening letter. Dear occupant, so it's not even to me. So it tells me it's a generic letter sent out to who? Every citizen in South Africa? I don't know, and telling me how I'd be sent to jail for 6 months, etc. So is the SABC incapable of merging their databases and weeding out people who actually do pay their licenses so they don't receive these threatening letters? And do you think threatening letters are going to encourage people to pay the licenses? Very, very bizarre situation all round. I'd like an answer to that. I'd also like to know what it costs to send it out. Or is the post office obliged to send your letters out free, gratis, and for nothing, bearing in mind that they're equally bankrupt? Looking at the audience numbers in terms of local content was a very interesting presentation, but you supply, for example, just 4% of new, fresh local content. That's with SABC 1, and the figures differ for 2 and 3. Do audiences show an appreciation of local content across the board? Are they bringing in sufficient to cover the cost of their production? You do, of course, have a few notable success stories, but you did say that you removed non-performing products. So how much do those and the production thereof lose the SABC in terms of audience buy-in or lack thereof? You said 60% of your current content needs to be reimagined. In other words, 60% is not earning for you. That's a massively high number. Are any recently commissioned programs in that loss-making sector? If so, please explain. You spoke a great deal about dramas, but what of the other arts, painting, ballet, opera, orchestral pieces, museum tours, and the like? Where are you in terms of the rest of the arts? Because one has always expected the SABC to be in the forefront of supporting our arts community. And how much are you currently paying freelance workers? I'm talking local actors, local producers, freelance radio announcers and the like, compared to, for example, last year and the year before? And are you extending your reach in this regard? The SABC's historically been a major employer in the freelance genre, as it were. Can you still make that claim? Do you see yourselves as supporting the theatre and the theatre groups and all the rest, because they're certainly being let down massively by the lotto? And many of the entities have closed down. Onto the post office. For some reason, I'm getting the impression that the post office is far more organized now. The presentation didn't try and snow us. I was very impressed by it. I no longer had the feeling that there was an attempt to hide information. It's very pleasing to actually hear Treasury regulations quoted by the presenter. So look, I'm told that the Hawks investigation that I instigated into the management removal of staff contributions for medical aid, pension and the like is at a very advanced stage. Your CFO and others, what is your involvement been in the investigation? I know they've done many interviews. I'm most interested to hear. And, you know, businesses all over the country are being bankrupted by having to pay for generators and diesel. I'm hearing figures are astounding, the amounts they're having to pay just to stay open. And each week I hear of another post office that's closed somewhere in the country. Do you have any generators at any post offices in the country? If so, what is the expense? I can't see that you can afford to pay diesel. So it just seems to me that the post offices presumably just close their doors every time there's load shedding, which in some areas is over and over and over during a day. I'm sure that has a massive impact also on your earning capability. Speaking of which, what will be the straw that breaks the post office's back? I mean, you cannot go on relying over and over and over on bailouts from Treasury. I was astounded that you were given some this time, but you know, staff are flooding out by the thousands, post offices are closing. What's the tipping point? What is the day, and what will it take for you to walk in and say, you know what, we can't do this anymore? I'm interested to know. Onto the CETA, in terms of your probity audits, as thieves work a system, it seems to me, over my years in Parliament, that there is a way of looking and working out exactly what the cutoff is, what expenses will be looked into more closely, and your cutoff is 10 million. Have you got a handle on the numbers of expenditures that fall just under the 10 million? Because that is the way it usually works, that they will, I mean, I know in the SAPs, they would literally spend R1 under that for massive expenditures over and over and over, certainly also as a fiscal dumping exercise. But I'm interested to see how closely you watch out for those, considering the irregular expenditure tendencies throughout. Postbank, there are certain phrases that I think would have any civilian avoid a bank like the plague. And one would, of course, be a disclaimer from the Auditor General. You've had 2 or 3 of those. There are many others, but some of them are in your presentation. Supply chain management irregularities, failure to follow procurement processes, poor planning, failure to commence procurement process on time, receiving services from expired contracts, lack of contract management. None of that improves your reputation, but certainly starting with a disclaimer from the AG. Now, I would have thought at this stage, you would be working on improving your reputation nationally and to the AG, of course, but I'm just not seeing it. When will we be able to see that you're actually taking this seriously, this move, an attempt to obtain a banking license? Because it seems to me at this stage, you simply won't ever get one. I think, Chair, that's it from me for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Maybe to join the colleagues and the committee in welcoming the new minister, an old friend of mine and in the Ekurhuleni municipality. Welcome, Chair, Honorable Minister. Sorry, I'm trying to switch on my video. I beg your pardon, Chairperson. Chairperson, just a few housekeeping issues, please. I think the way we are receiving the presentation is not doing us any favors. I am sitting here and I'm trying to go through my emails to see if I received the Zadna, BBI, and Sentech presentations. If they were sent, I am absolutely sorry. But I think there should really be a better way for us to receive documents. Receiving documents in 6 different emails does not help us, especially considering that we are not office bound, where you are not always having your laptop to put them in a folder and whatever. And so I think when we present a notice, we will form checklist so that you know as you prepare for a meet that you're expecting 10 presentations, and when you are missing one that falls through the cracks for whatever reason, you are able to go back, and then we come into this meeting and we do justice to the presentations, because it is my belief that entities do this so that they can account. But if they are coming to account to people who have not, my internet is unstable, Chairperson, so I'm going to switch off my camera. So if entities come and they are accounting to people who have not interacted with their presentations, we are not doing our job. That is that, Chairperson. We note the Nemisa presentation as well as the Film and Publication Board. My questions, Chairperson, especially to the Minister, is he able to give us more information on his plans to lift the moratoriums that we see in the entities? Because it is unfortunate that entity after entity, they are reporting that there is a moratorium, especially on critical vacancies. What are his plans to fill those or to help with secondments, especially on the critical vacancies, so that when the entities come to the portfolio committee, they do not use the issue of vacancies as whether a reason or an excuse for poor performance? So if the Minister could give us an update on that, please. Chairperson, all entities report irregular expenditure as historic, but with every entity, there is very little that we hear in terms of consequence management or there being criminal liability on the people who have left the entities with millions of taxpayers' money. I think that is, we've alluded to this fact in previous meetings. That is something that we really need to, at a policy level, investigate further, because you have who come in and make presentations to the committee and and everybody will say this is historic, but when we are sitting here in 3 years' time, somebody else will still be saying, oh, this is historic. So it's a never-ending cycle. Where are the transgressors and where criminal charges? On BBI and Sentech measure, when we last spoke on the issue, my understanding was that the minister needed to share, I think it's the share sale and purchase agreement. Is the minister able to give us an update on when that will be finalized? Because it was the next step in the process, just so that we are brought up to date in that. And I'm asking this because I know the minister is coming from the presidency. In fact, I was hoping the minister would give us more information on the SABC, especially that he comes from the presidency. But unfortunately for me, as he was speaking, I could not hear much of what he was saying because the network was really poor. So if you could just please come back on that. Chairperson, on CETA, the audit action plan is we welcome the audit action plan, which does tell us that out of the 171, 76 of those findings, in fact, it is 60% are being dealt with. But the worry, Chairperson, is that if we are going to accept that there has been a reduction from 820 million to 282 million, and have to celebrate that is a big worry, Chairperson, because at the end of the day, this is taxpayers' money. Every cent matters. And while we welcome the interventions to bring the reduction in, but that more should be done to really ensure that there is more accountability. And on the bid adjudication committee, the presenter says that senior employees have been assigned to that. Can I please be clarified on whether that is not a conflict of interest or not? And also we are being told that because there is a moratorium on the filling of vacancies, consultants are being used. I read that, and with my little knowledge, I thought that is one way to bypass the system. How sustainable is that? And we welcome that there has been an appointment of the managing director, and indeed, Mr. Khauwe, we thank you for acting in that position and wish you well in your position as CFO. Chairperson, I have already said that I did not get the Sentech presentation. Necessary aligned entities. Oh, okay, I can't see my own notes, but let me end there, Chairperson. If necessary, I will ask you to please allow me to come back. Now I can't see my own handwriting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Potlani. We hope you'll recover from that one. At least it's your own handwriting. Honorable Kubeka, you are recognized. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, let me acknowledge and appreciate or also welcome, firstly, the Minister from this new department on his side, and also the Deputy Minister on the side of the GIS. As I'm saying to them, a welcome. We hope we will work and we will try to move actually this boat together, in order that at the end of the day, we must see how best can we assist these entities in order to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So welcome, Minister, welcome, Deputy Minister. Chair, mine is just firstly the issue of appreciating and acknowledging these entities that have been mentioned, especially on the side of the irregularities, to say they are having no irregularities. It shows that now something has been done, because at the end of the day, we were having a concern with those irregularities. So I'm acknowledging the Icasa, Zadna, BBI, Nemisa, FPB, Usaasa, and also Usaf. As I'm saying, let them keep on just like that, not having to try to go down again in the future on that side of the irregularities. And also, Chair, what I would like just to ask or to have a verification on the side of the Minister on the issue of the critical posts. It's a priority, and if you can check, especially on the side of the department, since the acting DG was acting there, is he going to speed up the processes in order that we must close the ranks, especially on the side of all the entities on the side of the executive side, because it hampered the entity if there is a gap when they are supposed to work. So can he just at least promise us something on that side to say he will take care maybe on that side in order that they must close the gap? But I'm appreciating on the side of the entities, because previously the issue of consequence management, it was just a song. But at this present moment, according to all these entities as they were reporting, you can see that now indeed they are applying, they are dealing with the matters in order that they must try to avoid all whatever that needs to be avoided on the side of the irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. So I'm also uploading on that side, and I can see that on the side of the action plan, they were presenting also that how best can they remedy the situation if there is a challenge. So indeed, we are saying every time we will keep on complaining, but now we can see that they are trying to do something. And also I would like to sensitize, because I can see in most of the entities, it seems as if the issue that is key is the challenge on the side of the SCM. But probably as they are presenting, they were saying on the side of the action plan, they are focusing on it, they will deal with that thing. I hope all the entities, they can be very much being sensitized on that issue and give the employees the issue of the training in order that they can at least reduce or avoid that issue of being in a problem every time on the side of the SCM. So what else that I want to know, Chair, is on the side of the BBI and Sentech merger. Can they just maybe the minister just try to explain on our side to say how far are they with that merging? Are they nearer to conclude, or there are still some challenges there and there? And we want just to understand, because you can see that on the other side, one of the entity like BBI, it needs to have acting in order, and also on the side of the Sentech, in order that they can perform duties. So in order that to conclude the process, how far are they in order that they can have at least one stable executive committee? Thank you, Chair.
First one, Honorable Mlala. Honorable Mlala.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Another good so Chair, let me join my colleagues in welcome Minister of Communications and Technologies. Also welcome the Deputy Minister at the level of GCIS. You're welcome, Minister and the Deputy. I think I'm covered on a number of issues except for a few that I will raise now. The first one is on the filling of vacant positions. I think my understanding is that the moratorium was not restricting entities from filling critical positions. And maybe from my side, I would say, let's give the minister a benefit of the doubt so that he can sell it, because I don't know what were the reasons why the previous ministers had that moratorium, so that they can look at it and maybe it's more important that it be lifted. But for now, I would say let's give the minister benefit of the doubt so that he can also know and acclimatize. And then on the issue of sequence management, from almost entities, can I get clarity on the issue of the time, particularly on those that if it's a disciplinary process, we can have a clear picture of where can this be finalized. Acting, it's fine if there's in terms of this, we accept that, but it should be clear when should be getting results of those processes. So we don't have process continuously at the end of the next financial year. So in our report, in most instances, I would request
Guys, I suspect we lost Honorable Mlala.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are now.
Yes.
But we lost you a bit.
Yeah, the issue of the measure, I think my last concern around the the liability BBI. It was not clear what the liability is fine, but this was he implemented the minister before move. So to get clarity in that regard, maybe it will help us. And then with regard to irregular expenditure,
Lost you again, Honorable Mlala. We're losing you, Honorable Mlala. Maybe in the responses, if you so find that your point.
Yeah, yeah, I think the last point on the real expenditure. I think entities we can't hear in and out be discussing irregular expenditure. I think we should find a way, another way of dealing with this irregular expenditure, because seemingly, of course, we must also match those who don't have, but those who consequently have irregular expenditure. Yeah, Chair, thanks, man. I think my network is bad, man. I think that was my last point. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Mlala. Minister, the team would be asking you to make immediate responses and how you think you'd approach it. Whether you want to start or you would give the specifics first to respond and maybe to your closing point. It's up to you, but over to you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I've asked the DG to distribute the question. I expect that she has done. DG, can you guide that process? And then I'll come at the end.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you to the honorable members for the questions. Just a very brief one with regards to the questions for SABC. I will ask the Group CEO to respond on those very quickly on the TV license that was posed, as well as Section 1, as well as in terms of the irregularities.
Good morning again, Chair, and Honourable for sales. It includes, the portfolio includes TV licenses. The first question came from Honourable Gumbu, and it was in relation to a little bit of more detail and context in terms of the TV license loyalty program, or the program that we want to introduce. So the program is currently undergoing SCM processes, but it's intended to provide a carrot to the citizens of this country. In return for you paying a TV license, there are various modalities in terms of discount vouchers that we want to put on the table for such loyalty and etc. So hopefully increase the base. That's the first part. I also want to just highlight that the context under which we operate in, because obviously TV license is extremely tough business. It's a collection business, so it's a very, very tough business from that perspective. We're up against potential ASO cut off. There's also a change in terms of the licensing regime moving towards the household levy regime, which is obviously pending, and that is obviously playing in the minds of the citizens. An interesting example from the UK is obviously that their regime, their TV license collection regime has teeth. Not only do you get a threatening letter, but you also, there are serious consequences when there is non-compliance, which we don't have in our country. Hence, we are opting for other softer programs like loyalty programs. In response to Honorable Barnard, where she raised a couple of questions in terms of our modalities on how we process data, there's definitely a data processing and data cleansing process that we undertake as a matter of course, given the nature of the business that we're in. The cost of a letter is R5.85. And it also goes through the post office. We are a vendor of the post office, spending roughly 15 million rand per annum. Okay. And then the last point that Honorable Barnard raised, which I just want to make sure I cover, is because TV license is also private business. I would certainly not like to deal with her matters on a public platform. We certainly would welcome a private engagement, as we do with all our citizens where this matter is concerned. And this is not to raise any aspersions or question marks. It's just we don't deal with private accounts publicly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll continue on the questions regarding content. It's Merlin, the Group Executive for Video Entertainment. In terms of the graph that we presented, local content of 4%, talking to fresh content. So just remember, this is content that has never been broadcast before. It's not a recommission, it's not a new season, it's completely new content introduced to the schedule. When we add recommissioned shows, that percentage goes up to well above 20%. The question was asked, do audiences show an appreciation for local content? The top performing programs on SABC 1 and 2 are definitely local content. So international content does not appear in the top 20 of those channels. SABC 3 is a little bit different, where movie content comes up, which is foreign acquired content. And then in terms of sport content, the English Premier League also features quite highly there. But the rest of the content in terms of popularity on the platform generally is local content, i.e. content not only just produced in South Africa, but content in the local languages from the different provinces. The question around removing non-performing content. So it's a process that we're trying to implement. And technically what would happen in a broadcaster, you would produce a show for a schedule, so a particular slot on the schedule, and then you would produce a show as a running mate or as a stock item. We do not have the luxury to produce duplicate shows to keep them in the wings if something does not perform. I'll give you an example. In the US, if a show doesn't perform on opening night, the next night, a completely new show is put on the schedule. They can turn that around in 24 hours, i.e. cancel a contract, start a new contract with a new supplier, and a new show ready to go out to air. We are nowhere near that from an operational perspective. So we are looking at shows from an intervention perspective, firstly, and to update some of the concepts before we remove them completely. It's got to be strategic. Our audiences are very nostalgic. If we had to just murmur about the fact that a particular show is not performing well and we're considering, I can guarantee you the backlash we would get would be astronomical. Where we say 60% of the content requires a facelift, it doesn't mean that they're not performing. It means that it's not performing at the levels that we have set for them. They are still performing from a revenue perspective, but they would have performed a lot better in the past, or they could compete a lot better with content at that particular time slot in the universe. We don't just rely on drama. We're starting to introduce a lot more content onto the schedule. We've started to introduce Deal or No Deal. Masked Singer is coming up. So these are our sort of talent shows, reality formats that we're coming up to bring onto the show, onto the schedule. In terms of payment on freelancers, direct payment from a video entertainment perspective is 110 million rand spent so far. The AMOT budget has a percentage of that, but we don't have the exact breakdown in terms of staff costs in there. And then do we support local theatre? Some of these concepts from a theatre perspective have to translate to television, which means they have to compete with TV products in the market at the same time. So it's not something that translates directly into a successful production always. Yeah, I think those are questions.
Thank you, Chair. We'll hand back to you. Thank you, Chair. And then the next, I'd like to invite the Post Office just to quickly respond on the two issues that were raised, Section 189.
Right. Thank you, DG, and good morning, Minister, and welcome. The Post Office looks forward to presenting to you at the next allowing moment. I trust that I can project my voice. There is just a slight challenge with the video. I'll just do it briefly, and then I will then continue on the audio. Within the time that I was able to be on the platform, there is a time the system threw me out. I had noted 3 questions just to orientate the responses. The CEO is on board and will be able to take it from there as well. And those that I noted, one is the attitude of the unions, which I will speak to briefly. And the second one, the CEO and her team will handle, that concerns the operations and whether they are generators, as well as the tipping point one. But I could just say just something introductory to that. Otherwise, the team will run with it if it is necessary. Very briefly on the union attitude. At the beginning of last year, I think we met with the unions. The board convened a meeting with the unions in order to present on the Post Office of Tomorrow's strategy and have a discussion around that. As an important stakeholder, it was necessary that be done. And then the union noted that in the strategy adopted, it is foreseen that there will be a reduction of employees, as perhaps would be the case necessarily. However, they shared with us advice, which we have now been able to follow, which is not just to get into that exercise willy-nilly, to investigate possibilities, particularly with the Department of Labor, where the Productivity Institute is located. And they mentioned the various schemes, such as the Labor Activation Program. And we're able to do that. And I think we were well served by following that advice, because they opened our eyes widely. And there were quite a number of schemes that they spoke to, which would be available, that could ameliorate the situation somewhat, without guaranteeing, obviously, that there will be no loss of warm bodies. One of these relates, for example, to the funding that they have as the institute through the Department of Employment and Labor for income subsidization and TERS, and also supporting a turnaround strategy. And they convinced the board that they do have the necessary expertise in that direction. And so therefore, that exercise championed by our executive, as well as that one of Productivity Institute, is in full swing. And we have requested as a board a report on it on this coming Thursday, when we're going to have a board meeting. So we expect that there will be a report on that. We understand there were streams that have rolled out in that direction. The summary of that position is that, yes, there would be reductions, but they need not be willy-nilly and mechanical, given the situation in which we are. I will skip the one on generators. And there was a question, I think, from Honorable Colabanet around what would be the turning point. At what point shall we really close shop? Well, the adopted Post Office of Tomorrow strategy has got various pillars. One of those is partnerships, because the post office cannot start everything from scratch. It is, I think we described it in the last portfolio committee. It's been in analog mode for a while, and now the new course we're chatting is to make it on digital. And you do not, therefore, rely only on the limited expertise, on a limited budget to modernize and to digitize. You must have partnerships in that direction, particularly if you can see that there are certainly the competitors, there are other players there who are making it good time, whether it be in logistics, in the courier service, in e-commerce, and so on. So there is no reason why the post office would have to start from scratch. So that is a central pillar. The tipping point will come if we do nothing about that. If we continue to theorize on it and not take advantage of the fact that actually the post office, because of its footprint, because of its public service mandate and other things, is actually very attractive to those very competitors, some of whom have made advances on their own to the post office to say, can we partner? Because they can actually see the advantage. So that would then come if we don't do that. We're just encouraged by the pledged funding that will be forthcoming from the National Treasury. And at this stage, the discussion is in full swing to examine the conditionalities that we shall agree to. But the point has been made emphatically that this funding now should go into the support of the turnaround strategy in its implementation. I will pause at that point and hand over and invite the CEO to complement and elaborate and maybe clarify if necessary on some of the points I tried to make. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chair and members, Honorable Chair of the committee and members, the Honorable Minister, the Honorable Deputy Minister. I will only respond to one question around the generators. We have 32 generators nationwide, and they are nowhere near sufficient. And of course, we do suffer in terms of the load shedding. It does affect us negatively. However, those post offices which are in malls are covered because we use those that belong to the landlords and the malls. But the 32 I'm talking to are those that are deployed in our company-owned premises. The question on the Hawks investigation, with great respect to the Honorable Kola Barnard, I would like us to send the response in writing to your office on that. Chair, if you accept my responses, I'm happy to stop at this point. Thank you very much.
Get other responses, Chair.
DG, are we done? Oh, sorry, Chair.
Proceed, Minister was also checking the same.
Thank you very much. I think quite a lot of technical work has been attended to, Chair. Mine is just on 2 issues. I am on a trip to engage this week and next week with the relevant entities, just to have a sense of what is the state of affairs and how does it inform their respective way forwards, different ways forward. And then that will also take care of me having a sense of finalizing the clarity with regard to how the issue of the vacancies is going to be attended to. My attitude, Honorable Chair, is that before there should be a coincidence between asking for any institution to give results and at the same time opening the way for capacitation. Unless there are financial challenges with needs which call for alternative prudent look on how to deal with situations in a rather unroutine way. Again, on the issue of the purchase agreement, soon, during, I think, the course of this month, not later than its mid, I'm expecting a turnaround plan by Sentech, which is actually going to help me answer a lot of questions. And that would include even how will we handle the historic liabilities of the other institution, which will actually be coming together with it in a form rather of acquisitions than a merger. Having said that, that's how far we could go for the day, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair.
Am I not audible?
I could not hear you. I hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
I was about to chair.
No, thank you, Honorable Minister and team. I think honorable members would appreciate that you indicated initially that you are a Makoti and you are working on settling in the house. And I think your response begins to say that whilst there may be responses now, you'll be able to get back to the committee on the specific matters you needed to deal with, as you also need to understand the environment quite better. It is unfortunate, as I said in the beginning, that you are coming at a time when there's an expectation that you'll hit the ground running, beat deadlines in terms of what is expected. But we do take the commitment, though, that you are making, that it is not for the sake of making it. You understand the challenges, I think, from just the initial response, that you need to build capacity in order to get the results. I think that's a very important statement, and need to see that as you come back to the committee. maybe the point raised by members, which you must also take back, because it then talks to how it helps us to also do our oversight, that the entities are at different levels, and maybe the categorization thereof based on risks and everything else, and as well as responses to what the AG would have raised, so that we can package them properly, with you being able to meet timelines in terms of reports we need, so that we play meaningful oversight, not pressured with time, but rather have longer meetings that just pressing everything. Longer meetings, but make the necessary impact. So if you can keep that as a note as you go back. But more importantly is that the action plans usually get put up. The report from the AG is that in some instances, these do not really give you the results. So in that score, they get to be weak, but they are there. So with 60% reported and everything else reported, I think we may need to get to this point so that the reporting helps us to make informed decisions or conclusions from what we are getting from you. That it's one thing to address the legacy problems. It is another to have either repetitive or now incurring new as a result of lack of internal controls. So we'd want to get that sense that the internal controls are such that they are preventative of repeat findings, but as well as preventative as a way of showing sustainability in terms of systems that are put in place, procedures put in place, and that the people who manage those systems are now quite clear of what needs to happen. So that will, I think, help the committee a big deal, so that you understand the concerns where they come from. Like Honorable Mlala was saying, that you will have those that are regulars in terms of what would be irregular expenditure. You'd expect that it would happen in that space, and therefore the consequence doesn't seem to be an issue that gets implemented to deter reoccurrence of such. So with that, Honorable the Minister, as I said, we really appreciate that you've come, and we are confident that you'll be a regular to come before the committee whenever you are supposed to be coming before the committee. So we take it that is a sign of commitment as you raise your hands. You are fine with that. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. So with that having been said, we really want to thank all those who have presented. Minister, it is never the intention to keep you after you've dealt with your areas of work, so that you are able to continue to do work and your entities. But we also do not dismiss you if you really want to stay on the platform, not because we're going to ask you further questions later, but just to say that we are not forcing you to stay if you have to, as we would take the next presentation. I've tried to lobby GCIS, given that it is usually the short together with MTDA, that the 30 minutes should do, so that we use the other 30 to engage with members in that score. Deputy Minister, Honorable Mutau, I take it that you're still on the platform. You've now already learned how we are approaching matters. So if we can just check on that. Am I audible, members?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, I saw that the gadget says something else on my side. So I wanted to be sure. So now give over to the Deputy Minister if she's still online, and that will take the 30 minutes thereafter to get the presentation all together. Thank you. What you?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable Minister, Honorable members. Thanks for the opportunity. I have the following officials from GCIS with me: Acting Director General, Mr. Michael, Ms. Nomonde, Ms. Mavimbela, who are both Director Generals responsible for Branch 1, Corporate Service, and Branch 2, Content Processing and Dissemination, respectively, and Acting DDG Intergovernmental Coordination and Stakeholder Management. I also have Mr. Sandile Nene, who's the Chief Director, Media Policy and GCIS at GCIS, and the Secretariat for the Mac Charter Council. Chairperson, may I at this stage also acknowledge the presence of our inaugural Marketing and Advertising Charter, Mac Council, who just like me are appearing in Parliament and in this committee for the first time since their appointment. The Mac Charter could lead. The Mac Charter Council is led by Mr. Tandi and Ms. Ukaba as chairperson and deputy chairperson, respectively. I am also wish to acknowledge the presence of the chairpersons of 4 subcommittees. These are Mr. Tebogo Disejo, who leads Governance, Finance, and Fundraising, Ms. Jafta, who leads Consumer Education and Awareness, Ms. Lebohang Sitole, who leads Planning, Strategy, and Regulation, as well as Mr. Veli Ngubani, who leads Research and Monitoring. Chairperson, you'll recall that 2001, 2003, 2004, and in 2011, after concluding public hearings, the Portfolio Committee on Communications instructed the GCIS to enforce transformation in the sector. In March last year, we appointed and launched the Marketing, Advertising, and Communication MAC BEE Sector Council. The aim is to ensure that transformation in the sector is promoted and reported and monitored. Each financial year, the Council will table an annual transformation report before the Minister and myself, the DTIC, the BEE Commission, and the Presidency's Advisor Council on BEE. The presentation will deal with the Council mandate and its activities in all 9 provinces since their appointment. On 30% advertising expenditure to community media, Chairperson, community media is neither for profit nor for bankruptcy. To its end, as GCIS will present its short and long-term measure in this regard. This measure by GCIS includes developing a white paper policy which will ensure that, amongst other measures, the issue of 30% set aside by government institutions to support community media is binding and enforceable with the permission. I will then hand this over to GCIS management to deal with the presentation, Chairperson. I thank you.
Good job. GCIS.
Thank you. Thank you, Machingelani. I will load. Can I have the rights and so that I can share the presentation?
You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask Sandile please to help me load the presentation? I'm having issues on my side.
Thank you. If I could be given rights, Chair.
You can go ahead, Mr. Nene.
Thank you, honorable parliamentarians, colleagues who have joined in, the Mac Council who's joining us for the first time here, and all the new parliamentarians who have been appointed to this committee. I thank you, and my name is Rakhumuditwe Mavimbela, and I am the DDG for Content Processing and Dissemination, as already introduced. This presentation will be in two parts. I will start with the part which we were requested to respond on the 30% ad spend to community media, which will be followed by the part on the Mac Council and what GCIS has done in terms of the developments in that area and the appointment of the council. Next slide. Next slide. The next slide just summarizes what the presentation will entail. I see that it's not moving. And the slide number 3 also just speaks to GCIS mandate, which I will not go through. So if you can just go on to slide number 4, Mr. Nene. Yes, so over the last 20 years, government has invested over 500 million in this sector, which came as in a form of financial and non-financial benefits. This shows the significance that we place on this sector. It is not enough because the sector of marketing and communication actually accounts to much more than just 500 million. And as such, we have developed short-term and medium-term tactics on how is it that we can improve and also make a higher contribution to this sector. The first stance that we have taken as GCIS, as our media buying unit, which does bulk buying for government departments, is to actually increase the rate card rate that we allocate to community media. So what they give us actually through the platforms and the associations is that we are able to negotiate with them what is an acceptable rate for a 30-second slot. So a 30-second slot will be an advert that will broadcast on a radio platform, on a TV platform, and on print as well. We agree on a column rate. So we have revised the rate after the consultation with NCRF, the Association of Christian Media, that will comprise of your radio, Rainbow Radio, and other TV channels that are on the DSTV bouquet, and the Forum of Community TV. And through the Mac Council Charter, which they will outline as well in their presentation, we are looking at having a proviso to encourage private sector to advertise in community media in exchange for favorable BEE points. And given that we are also looking at not just government and private sector to start having an impact and contributing impactfully in this market, we are looking at a community sustainability model through MDDA. So MDDA is currently undergoing research to do a sustainability model, and that will be implemented through the various community media so that they can also compete with your commercial stations. I mean, the likes of Josie SFM were started as a community media, and right now they can compete on the same par as your commercial stations. Next slide. This is just an account of what has been spent by government departments to dating back to the financial year of 2020-2022, And the total ad spend, if you can see there, is 52 million. And this is where we're saying that it can improve. Next slide. In this area also, the other intervention that we're looking at of really making an impact, a visible impact, is the development of a white paper. So the minister in the presidency in 2021 approved the development of a white paper, and the purpose of that is really to modernize government communication. And GCIS has actually commenced the development of a green paper, and we will be taking it to stakeholder for comments. And some of the proposed chapters in the white paper is the chapter on the powers of the minister. Currently, there is no authority by an executive authority who looks after GCIS to pin down on areas of non-compliance in communication. And the minister really just relies on a gentleman's agreement with his colleagues that they will communicate their programs and the like. Also the other area is to prioritize communication as a function which must be reflected in performance contract and service delivery models. And this would be performance contracts of ministers, deputy ministers, premiers, MECs, executive mayors, deputy director generals, and the like. And also reiterating on the 30 ad spend, that's also another chapter in the white paper, and the centralization of media procurement just to drive the bulk buying and also to ensure that due process is followed in terms of the 30 ad spend that we're proposing. Next slide. So basically, what the overall white paper seek to do is to professionalize the communication sector, especially in government, that we go for constant training, we develop accreditation, just to make sure that the right, when we say that an official is appointed as a communicator in government, that they have the right training and the right accreditation, their performance agreements are aligned, that there's uniformity across the departments, that we stress the developmental communication, because developmental communication strives more on educating, on informing the citizens as part of the constitution to help them make right decisions, the centralization of procurement, the brand management, which seeks to also issue policy direction on brand South Africa, the performance management has been mentioned, and communication management. That concludes the presentation. I thank you. I will now hand over to Sandile Nene, who will now present on the Mac Council. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. So, Chair, without any waste of time, I'm going to go straight to slide number 2. Then we jump to number 3, 4, and then slide number 9. Essentially, Chair, just to summarize the slide, is that in terms of the Constitution, institutions that were expected, or at least that enjoy exclusivity, whether by direct or indirect in the past regime, they were expected to embrace transformation. So the BEE legislation, as well as the policy, including the codes of good practice, then gave us the mechanism in terms of what then happens in terms of the framework to appoint a sector council in instances where the generic code, or at least the generic code of good governance, is not applicable. So in our sector, in terms of section 9.1, enjoined by section 21.5 of the sector code, the minister then started the process by gazetting the call for nomination. Because this process is sector-based, it's a sector merit appointment based, but also it allows the public as well to nominate persons to serve onto the council. So this was done, Chairperson, and then we know that in March last year, as we've alluded to it previously, the minister then appointed the sector council, and I don't think, Chair, that there's a prize for guessing who the minister that appointed the sector council. These are just the name of the members of the sector council who are here. They are led by the chairperson, Angela Tendi, as it has been alluded. But in terms of the operations of the charter council, they work with, and they are divided into 4 subcommittees, as we can all see. And in terms of the approach that was taken by the minister, supported by the department, was that the minister appointed the chairperson, which is in line with the law, but the minister also then appointed the deputy chair and the chairpersons of subcommittees after the recommendations that were made by the Charter Council itself. In other words, there was a joint process in the appointment of those that are leading. Obviously, I'm not going to then deal with what each governance or subcommittee does, but of course, then it's important to also note that these are members of South Africa, or these are South Africans who are not getting any money from doing the work. We're not paying them. Of course, the expectation is that if they are able to fundraise enough money, they would be paid. Chair, one of the things that the minister did, this is now number 3, what are the functions of the sector council? Any sector council, because we've got in government, there are 10 sector councils right now. Any sector council is appointed to ensure that transformation is promoted, monitored. And they do this through the annual transformation report, which if at the end of each financial year, they will then have to submit it to the line function ministry. So if you are a tourism, you have to submit it to your ministry. Then they will have to submit to DTIC, purely because all charter councils report to DTIC. In terms of the law, DTIC is the custodian. They will also then have to submit the information to the BBBE Commission, to the BE Commission, as well as the other institutions. Essentially, Chair, now that we have established what is the work of the sector council, I'm not going to go through some of these things, but they also then have another mandate, which is to grow the sector, make sure that we balance transformation with the growth, so that at least we can grow the quantum of the economy so that you level the playing field. That's the function of a sector council. Now, in doing so, one of the things that, as we have indicated, Chair, is that our charter council was only appointed last year, yet the sector code was gazetted in 2016. So what it means is that depending on each sector, in our case, the lifespan of a sector code is 4 years. So under normal circumstances, between 2016 and 2020, the sector council ought to have been amended. However, this part could not be concluded because government is not allowed to run with public consultation or to review the sector code. It is the function legally of the structure called a sector council that must oversee the adherence to the BE elements by the sector itself. So when the minister launched and appointed the sector council, one of the foremost important thing that was given to the sector council was to review the sector code, because it was that 4-year period, plus the DTIC on its own had issued a gazette in 2019, which is binding to all sector councils with specific indication of what needed to be changed. Just to illustrate, Chair, that the sector code, once it has been gazetted by the Minister of DTI, it is binding to all, qualifying entities in that sector. Whether you are a small company or you're a JSE listed company. So that's the the importance of adhering to the sector code, which is monitored by the sector council. I'm going to move over because this we've moved. One of the things that since their appointment, Chair, since they were appointed last year, March, what the sector council has done, they've moved with speed to review the 2016 sector code. And this is done through the reviewing of the code. They've gone to all the 9 provinces, and we've taken both oral and written input in terms of what it is that we need to change, how have we fared with other codes in as far as transformation is concerned. You'll recall, Chair, that there are 7 elements in the BE in terms of how transformation charters should adhere to. One of those would be ownership, management and control, skills, preferential procurement, enterprise supply development. All of those things, they need to test whether some of these things need to be amended and how we should go about amending those things. But there are also additional elements, Chair, where, for instance, I'll just move straight to this 9 before we conclude. Some of the other elements that they would need to do is they would also need to take into account what has happened in the sector in terms of changes, mergers and acquisition in the sector, but also they are also empowered to then provide some of the recommendations to government. In this instance, we talk about the treatment of OTTs. I mean, we know that Facebook, Google, which used to be a search engine, they are now taking so much advertising away from this country in terms of the amount, and they're not contributing. What should be the posture and the position of the country? That would be the function of the sector council to advise government. We also then talk about responsible marketing, which is part of the additional points. Remember, much as there are 7 elements, but the sector-based intervention requires that the council working with the sector then ask the question, what are we going to do in addition to what we've been given by the law? So one of those is to look at all the national programs to say, how do they intervene in issues of national importance? These would be gender-based violence. It would also be energy crisis, the energy crisis that we are in now, where, for instance, there could be mechanism where if you are in the outdoor sector, you may have to, as part of providing additional or alternative energy, but you also need to benefit the nearby communities for the for BE points. We also speak about some of the non-financial penalties for those who are not compliant, purely because, Chair, one of the things that would continue to pick up is that companies would always budget some of the penalties, but we are moving beyond that so that some of those things will include bearing companies that are not compliant to some of the prestigious awards. We are now, Chair, talking about some of the things which are additional point. My colleague referred to the fact that at some point, as part of maybe enterprise supply development, companies should also then provide, or at least they should be BE favorable points for companies that are supporting community media projects. By that, we mean community media as per the legislation, which is the MDDA Act, not any other. Those are the ones that you are referring to. Chair, the last point, which is quite important for us and for the Charter Council, is the treatment of these OTTs and how do we then interact with them. The research is telling us that this year, the advertising revenues that is generated by OTTs is going to overtake the entire industry's revenue, which is generated by the out-of-media or out-of-home sector. So as a second last slide, this is just a demonstration, Chair, of all the public consultations that the Sector Council has embarked upon, starting after the notice was published in the Government Gazette by the Minister. Of course, then this project is not complete because the Sector Council is doing the final rounds of consultation. Thank you so much.
Chairperson.
Yes, am I audible now?
We can hear you, Chair.
Okay. I would want to just check with the Deputy Minister first before we proceed. There was an earlier request that the Ministry wanted to apply their mind on the governance matters related to the MTDA, and therefore wanted a bit of time to also have consultations. May I just check if that's still the case before we agree on getting MTDA to present, so that we allow members to engage the matters that have already been presented? Can I get that indication there?
Thank Chair. Yes, I'm going to make some consultation first, Chair, and then I will come back to the committee to give response.
Well, thank you, Minister. I think it's only fair that we give you space on that if there's not been interactions with the entity.
Yes,
however,
please.
With the ones that have been presented, I would now invite honorable members who would want to engage the presentation. But before I do that, I just want to be sure if it's Elkasi hand or what from Rehomoditswe. That's the hand I see before I give to honorable members.
No, Chair. I was responding on the issue of MDDA. So I just wanted to concur with the DM that yes, indeed, the minister, given that she is new to the issues, she wanted to actually understand and interrogate the governance issues before she brings them to the portfolio committee. So she has requested that she interrogates them first, and then once she's ready, she will bring them to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. May I now, as I say, go to members who want to interact with the presentation. You would also help me, Ajra, commit support.
Yes, Chair.
I do see Honorable Kolabanat.
That's about all, Chair.
And other hand?
No,
May I proceed, Chair?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, just one question to GCIS. If they could please expand on the use of these so-called intermediaries. It seems that they benefit more than the actual beneficiaries. Is this a practice that you intend stopping? Thank you. That's it, Chair.
Any other member who would want to contribute? If not, I will then ask for the response on that.
Thank you, Chair. I will take the question. On the issue of intermediaries, I would actually request the honorable member to just clarify. Are you referring to agencies, media agencies, production agencies, or above the line agencies, so that I answer adequately to your question? Thank you.
Honorable Kolabanat, do you want to clarify?
Pardon, Chair. This was a question that actually Honorable Bodlani asked me to put because she had to leave the meeting to catch a bus into Parliament. So it was what you refer to as intermediaries. And she says it seems as though they benefit more than the real beneficiaries. And so will the practice of using intermediaries be stopped? That is the question.
I see Honorable Bodlani's hand. I'm sure she wants to further clarify the question.
I'm sorry, Chairperson. I'm now standing on the street corner, but the presentation says exactly that, intermediaries. So maybe the follow-up would be, how does the process work? Because now the question is giving us more information so that we are also empowered. And thank you to Honorable Kwala Barnett.